Dash just turned a year old, like 2.5 weeks ago, so he is still very much so a baby. So we'll start out with holding him, and then I think Flash is still probably at the very top of his enclosure. Yes, he is. And so we'll start out here with Dash. And Dash is one of our holding sloths, and so whenever you interact with a sloth, you have to keep in mind that their eyesight is extremely poor. So that has to be at the forefront of our memory whenever we're interacting with them. You know, so like if a fly or something were to land on his face, it's kind of second nature to us to just go like this to get it off of him.
Oh.
But motion really is startling for them. Their eyesight is extremely poor. They can't really tell what it is that's moving. They just see something moving, and they can pick up motion a lot better than we can. So even just a small movement, they're going to react to it. They're going to look at it. So when we're petting them, you'll support underneath the booty just like this. And then you'll take one hand, just a real slow, open-handed pet like this down the middle of the back. They're not like any other animals where another animal like a dog or a cat might like the scritches. They don't really care for that. And something that's more tempting with Dash is to pet him underneath his chin, because a lot of times he'll turn his head back to look back behind him to see what's going on. But that can be kind of startling for him too, because something all of a sudden going for a sloth's neck that they can't see, it can be kind of scary.
Can't blame them.
As well as the legs, that's kind of their security, you know, as long as they're holding on to you.
Right
Yeah, as long as they're holding on to you, they feel secure, so they don't really like to have their legs touched or pulled away from you or anything like that. But if you want to have a seat there in the blue chair, he's going to twist around and he'll wrap his back legs around your waist, and you'll take one hand to put underneath his booty and then the other hand on his back.
Do you want my phone call?
Yeah, it might be better to get out before we transfer over here.
And then I'll just put it on camera.
Okay. Alright, Dash. There we go. So we've had Dash since he was about five months old. And when we first got him, he was a lot darker than he is now. He was a real dark brown color. He's lightened up quite a bit. When they're first born, they need some form of camouflage, and they're not born with that moss and algae already on them like their mom has. So they're born a lot darker so that they camouflage into her stomach as she's holding on to the underside of that branch. And in the rainforest with all of the leaves and everything right above them, all the shadows, it just kind of makes that baby, you know, just blend right into the mom's chest there. Works out well for them, but this type of behavior for a sloth is not typical of sloths. Typically people think about sloths being really slow, gentle, docile animals, and in the wild they are as long as they're left alone. But if you try to have an interaction like this with a wild sloth or a sloth that had never been held before, it would go very, very differently for you. Dash was conditioned from a very young age to make it enjoyable for him to be held by people, and that's not something that's just going to happen overnight. And so, you know, when he was a little baby still on the mother, they looked for the mom for, you know, kind of reassurance and comfort and everything. And so the mom had already done it before in the program that he was bred into. And so she wasn't stressed at all with the interaction, therefore he wasn't stressed. And it's always just that positive interaction that they're having with a person to just slowly work them up. I'm going to hand you the little food bowl here if you wanted to hold this about right there. I think that's what he's looking for. He said, oh yeah, that's what I was looking for.
It's rice.
It's brown rice, and that's shaved up sweet potato actually.
Oh, sweet potato.
Yeah, and then the little brown pieces is actually a really high quality dog food that's been soaked in water and then mixed into it.
Yeah.
And they stay on that mixture for a good majority of their diet until they're about 2 years old. That's really where they get most of their protein from and everything. And it meets a lot of their requirements. Of course, they get a lot of the leafy greens like spinach and kale and you know, romaine lettuce and spring mix and things like that. When they're little, they prefer this rice mixture.
So cute.
I did mention.
They say their skin was really like wiry, and he feels quite soft.
Yeah, their hair. A lot of people think that their fur would be a lot more coarse because they've seen a lot of the pictures of wild sloths, and theirs is a lot more coarse because they've got all that moss and algae growing on their backs. And for them, it's really important that they have that because that's not only how they camouflage in to the rest of the canopy of the rainforest, but that's actually how they digest their food. It's an entire ecosystem that lives on their backs, and they have a symbiotic relationship with moths that live all throughout their fur. And those moths produce the bacteria that the sloth will use to digest their food. And so it's a whole relationship that they've got going on with everything growing on their back there. So it's really important for them to have that more coarse, wiry hair to start to form all that moss and algae and everything. But in captivity, he doesn't need any of that because he's not trying to be camouflaged into anything. He doesn't have any other animals that are looking out to try to eat him. And they don't need the moths because they get that bacteria from another source. They get it from their mother, actually, when they're around 3 days old. They'll start to lick the mom in the corners of her mouth to kind of get some of the food that she's eating, and they'll lick up some of her saliva as well, and that bacteria is also in her saliva. I did mention that they have really bad eyesight. They have a condition that's called rod monochromacy, and that just means that they only have rod cells in their eyes and no cone cells. The cone cells are what's responsible for seeing color, so they are colorblind since they don't have them, but they have even more rod cells than we do, and the rod cells pick up motion. So something out of the corner of my eye, like a little mouse running across the floor or something, my brain may deem as insignificant. It's not a threat to me. It's not going to really matter. So I might see it, but I'm not going to be too alarmed by it. But for a sloth, any sort of a little movement, their eyesight is already a lot more, or their field of vision is a lot more narrow already. But if they see just a tiny little something slowly moving out of the corner of their eye, it's hardwired into them to go ahead and react to that. Turn their head and make sure it's not something that's going to be scary, because in the wild, a jaguar is not going to come barreling out on the end of that branch after the sloth. They're going to be sneaking up on them, and so they've got to be able to pick that up, because sloths don't really have a whole lot of defense otherwise.
They don't run away very well.
Yeah. They can have short bursts of energy, you know, if they're startled by something and they look and they see that it is something that is in fact coming towards them. They're really their first line of defense is to just use as much energy as they can all of a sudden to get to the very end of that branch as quickly as possible. It's not going to be as quick as, you know,
Right.
we would or whatever, but, you know, obviously they can move a little bit quicker than some people imagine. But they'll get out all the way to the end of that branch. And that branch may be able to support a 10 or 15 pound sloth, but if it is a jaguar that's daring enough to go out on the end of the branch as well, the branch probably won't be able to support a 35 or 40 pound cat as well. So that branch would probably eventually break. And if that happened and they both falling to the floor, the sloth will almost certainly survive that fall, and the cat probably not, because that fall is probably going to be from a height of 100 feet up in the air, and sloths are built to be able to withstand that. But a cat's going to be trying to land on all 4 feet, which from a height of, 5, 10 feet in the air would be fine, but from that height, they're probably going to break all 4 legs, so it's not going to work out as well for them. What do you think, baby? Did you get your mouth full?
You got razor in your nose.
Oh yeah, and he hates to have his face cleaned off too. He's just like a toddler.
How long do they usually live?
In captivity, the oldest sloth that we know of lives to be 54 years old. Now, with any animal that would, naturally have a lot of other animals trying to eat them out in the wild, they're obviously going to live a lot longer in captivity because they don't have any of that here. But there's not been any scientists that have been able to track one singular sloth from birth until natural passing in the wild, and so we're not exactly sure what it would be in the wild. Now, typically, the oldest one lived to be 54 in captivity. Typically, they only live to be around 30, which is still a lot. It's still a long time. And in the wild, we expect it to be probably about half of what it is normally here in captivity. So probably around 15 years is what we're estimating.
Their sense of smell is really good.
It
You
is.
can see them sniffing,
Yeah, since their eyesight is so poor, if you think about losing one of your senses, your other senses tend to be heightened. So for them, they're
It's almost always moving, his nose.
their sense of
look very
smell and hearing
tired.
is really, really good. I think he's done with this. I'll go ahead and take this from you. You can have a free hand. And you're welcome to sit in this chair too if that's more comfortable for you. That way you can both kind of be close to him.
Are you taking a video or something?
I think, let's see. Kevin does all this. Yeah, we're live on TikTok and Facebook right now. Yeah.
And do you send that video? Can we get that video?
On Facebook, it will be on there, and YouTube, it'll be on there. But the TikTok, it goes away afterwards.
Yeah.
But yeah, if you just look up the Ocoee Riverside Farm afterwards, it'll be on there for like, I forget, 30 days or something. And then it'll basically disappear. Did you guys come down just for this encounter, or you guys coming down for something else too?
Down here, we came down just for this. She's
Yeah.
been enamored with that, for going over to the store and probably buying a bunch of stuff.
Yeah.
She has sloth everything,
Mm-hmm.
and, but we're taking a little road trip. We're headed
Yeah.
out to Montana.
Oh, cool.
And, but we had to come here first.
Yeah. Did you guys fly down, or?
Nope, we drove.
Oh wow, how long of a drive is that?
About, I don't know, 15 hours
Yeah.
maybe.
Oh my goodness.
And, but it's not as far as you think.
Yeah.
But it's worth it.
Well, if Flash doesn't decide to come down, then you may get a little bit of an upgrade and actually get to hold him the whole time or the whole hour. Sometimes if Flash was raised very differently than Dash was, and so Dash obviously is comfortable with being held. He actively seeks out human interaction. If he was already awake in that basket and he heard us coming in, he was sleeping when I uncovered him. But if he was already awake and he heard us talking in here and we weren't picking him up, he would have automatically uncovered himself and started reaching out, trying to get somebody to pick him up, because that's what he genuinely enjoys. And that didn't happen overnight, like I said, so there was a lot of time that went into him to get him to that point from a really young age, but Flash didn't have that. So Flash, after he was weaned from his mother around 5 months old, he basically went into solitary confinement, and that's what he wanted. You know, sloths naturally are very, very solitary animals, don't want to be around people, don't want to be around other sloths, and so, you know, it was just natural for him. So the facility that we got him from when he was already about 3 years old, it was basically like a zoo. It was just observation only. You know, somebody would go in there to give him his food in his dish, but that was about it. That was about all the interaction that he had. And so he doesn't, in the mornings, you know, he's not looking for us to come in there and interact with him because we don't hold Flash, but he likes his food. He likes to come down for that. And regardless, you know, he still gets his food in his dish even if he decides not to come down in the morning. They don't have to perform for their food or anything like that. So he'll still get his breakfast in there. And sometimes if he just decides to stay up there, then we don't ever force him to do anything they don't want to do. And so with him, it's kind of like you just get a little free upgrade because you get to hold the whole time. Or else otherwise you just get to for about 30 minutes. But Dash does not mind at all. He is beautiful. They do kind of pick their favorites like dogs do as well. You'd be surprised that for Flash, John, the man that you were talking to before you came in, that is his person. He and Donna are the owners. And so when they first got Flash, they had 3 employees, 2 of which being John and Donna. And so there wasn't a whole lot back then. That was about 3.5 years ago. And so at that point, John was the only, you know, primary caregiver for Flash. So he was in there every day talking to him. And at that point, you know, when we first got him, he wasn't coming down for nothing. He wasn't going to come down and interact with us or anything like that. So John would just go in there and spend a long time in there with him, just talking, just sitting on the floor, getting him used to, you know, somebody being in there with him. So it just became normal, became natural for him. And sloths are very routine animals. They like to do the same thing around the same time every single day. So that's why typically for Flash, we'll open up that door first thing in the morning around 9:30 when I get here. And I start chopping up everybody's breakfast, getting everybody's foods ready and everything. And he'll come on down, he'll hook onto that door frame and be out here before I know it, and I'll turn around and he's there. That's typically what his routine is. Occasionally he gets thrown off a little bit if there's more movement around down here, or like right now when it's kind of starting to transition over to be a little bit colder in the mornings. If we can't open up that door, that throws off his routine. The door to go into his outside enclosure, because it has to stay at least 78, 79 degrees in here. So if it's 70 outside, we don't open that up. And it's a little bit warmer this morning, so we were able to. But even just something like that will throw him off too. If he's looking down there and sees this door open and not that door, he's like, what's the big idea? What's going on? They don't like change. They don't like anything different. So sometimes that throws him off a little bit. But as long as all the conditions are right and it's normal for him, there's not a whole lot of commotion, there's just normal activity going on down here.
No, I was just gonna pick it up.
I know it's so tempting, but he really doesn't like it. But yeah, so typically he comes down, it's very normal for him, very routine, but this morning we didn't open up that door right away, and there's a lot of other people coming in and out right as soon as I opened up that door, and so that's why he's probably staying up there for a little bit longer. we'll see. Sometimes he changes his mind, decides to come back down.
Can I look?
Yeah, you can go in there. He's all the way at the top of his enclosure right now. You may have to step in. That little tongue sticking out, buddy.
Oh, curl up.
He started out in his hammock this morning, and then he moved over to where he's at now.
Do you wanna sit here and hold him?
No. Whatever you help. Full time.
Oh, you have to hold him for a minute.
It's very unlike any other position that you're in with an
Yeah.
animal. Yeah. There's not a whole lot of things that animals, at least, that will hold on to you like a little
Yeah.
baby. But it's just a natural position for them. And for a sloth, everything is designed for them to be an upside down animal. Even everything down to the way that their hair parts. For a dog, it parts down the middle of their back on their spine and will fall down the middle. For a sloth, it's in the middle of their belly that it'll part and it goes down the other way. Because they spend, their whole lives upside down like that, and that's just natural. And for them to be on the floor and like crawling, that's like them being upside down. That's why everything is just jumbled in the wrong place. Even their eyesight, some scientists will speculate that when their head is twisted upside down looking, that's their way of seeing right side up. But when they're down the ground crawling, that's like everything is flipped upside down for them. And it makes sense because literally every other aspect of their body is designed for them to be upside down animals. Everything from the locking mechanisms in their claws, the way that their digestive system is set up with the one-way valves that go in one way and out the other, the way they've got connective tissue holding everything right where it's supposed to, and their circulatory system. Now, their circulatory system is extremely adaptable and can change to whatever position that they put themselves into, because naturally, the most normal position for a sloth to be in is completely upside down, hanging all four feet onto the branch. But they can actually let go with their front claws, just be holding on by their back, and be completely inverted, reaching all the way down to reach for a branch that's lower than them. And their circulatory system can adapt and change to that position. For us, we're built to be upright animals, our feet at the lowest point and our head at the highest. And if I do a handstand and invert myself, all the blood's gonna go rushing to my head and my feet are gonna fall asleep. Likewise, if I raise my hand up for a certain amount of time, all the blood's gonna rush down from my hand to my shoulder, my hand's gonna fall asleep. But for a sloth, they don't experience anything like that because whatever position that they put themselves into, their circulatory system will pick that up. Some valves will slam closed and others will pump harder to ensure that they're getting adequate blood flow all throughout their body while not allowing it to pull to one side or the other. So it works out really well for them. It's designed to work best when they're upside down, but when they're sitting upright like this or when they're going down to use the bathroom, when they're on the floor, it works out either way. They can adapt and change to that.
They don't go to the bathroom very often.
They don't. They only go about once a week. It's about every 7 to 10 days, yeah. And so you can imagine holding it for that long, it tends to build up quite a bit. And so they expel about 1/3 of their entire body weight when they go to the bathroom because it's not just feces, it's urine as well. So they expel both at the same time when they go down to the base of the tree.
I thought they'd be bigger.
Well, he's just a baby, but the two-toed sloth can get to be up to 20 pounds at their max.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is the three-toe bigger?
No, three-toes tend to be a little bit smaller.
Okay.
Yeah, they get to be about 10 pounds at their max, and that's about it.
Do they have much for teeth?
They don't have any teeth in the very front of their mouths right there,
See, yeah.
but they've got 4 really sharp canines on the sides of their mouth, and back behind that are all of their molars, and their molars are not flat like ours are, they're all pointed. So if you were to look at the skull or the skeleton of a sloth without knowing anything about the animal, you would definitely think they were a carnivore, top of the food chain, swinging through branches, swiping things out of the tree. But in reality, to see what they actually are is pretty ironic because they just use those teeth to grind up the leaves that they're eating. Because in the wild, they eat 95% leaf material, the leaves of the sarcopia trees that they're living in. But it works out a lot better for them. It's a lot more efficient to grind them than it is to chomp up leaves. So. And they're actually self-sharpening as well. Every time they close their mouth, those teeth will grind together just right to keep them sharp every time. And it's really cool the way that their canines are aligned to where their top canines go just a little bit in front of their bottom canines, but they fit together every time. They just, you can almost hear a little squeak every time they close their mouth or a little grinding noise because it makes them sharpen every time. And it needs to be, because for a sloth, that's really their only defense. You know, their bite force is not very strong, but their teeth are obviously very sharp because they sharpen every time they close their mouths. And they can use that as a deterrent, but it's not going to really do a whole lot for a jaguar that's trying to eat them.
Is that their biggest predator?
Not the biggest one, actually. The harpy eagle is the most successful one that can pick out the sloths, because for sloths, they typically spend most of their time up at the very, very tops of the trees or out on the very end of the limbs. And that's because those are where the most fresher leaves are growing. And for a sloth, those sarcopia leaves that they're eating actually will build up a toxin in them over time. And the older leaves will have a lot more of those toxins, but the younger leaves have not had a chance to develop that yet. And there's not as much cellulose, so they're a lot easier to digest. So that's really what they eat the most, are the more fresher leaves. And those are at the top and out on the very end of the branches. And when they're out there, there's not as much foliage. And so if a harpy eagle spots them, they just have the element of surprise. And so they'll just grab them and rip them right off the branch. And for a sloth, you know, their grip strength is amazing. And they're not going to be squeezing onto the branch the whole time. They're just going to have their claws kind of locked around the branch. And if all of a sudden something comes out of nowhere and snatches them and rips them off, they don't have enough time to squeeze down. But for a jaguar, if a jaguar were to grab onto the back of a sloth and dangle all of their body weight from that animal's back, the sloth would continue to hang there because their grip strength works opposite to ours. Whereas for us, open-handed is our relaxed state. It's not taking any energy to do this. And to squeeze and make a fist or hold onto a branch of a tree, that's more difficult. I'm using muscle to do that. For a sloth, it's backwards. To open up those claws is more difficult. That's when they're using their muscles. But to squeeze down really tight is effortless because all of the muscles and tendons and ligaments and everything that are in their forearms are extremely tight. So this is natural, and they have to use muscles in the back of their arm to open that claw up. So they're just going to be squeezing on there. Obviously, it's going to hurt pretty bad having a cat hanging on their back. They're probably going to sustain a lot of damage from it, but they have the ability to be able to do that. And if they're seeing it coming, if they see a jaguar slowly creeping out on the end of that branch and they've gone all the way out as far as they can, they just don't really have a whole lot of it to do than just hold on and hope that branch breaks. So, and sloths do actually fall out of the trees that they're living in about once a week on average. It does happen quite often, and it's not because they get tired and they let go, because this is their tired state, this is their relaxed state, so they're not going to just let go all of a sudden. But if they're falling from the trees, like if they're going out to the end of the branches and there's a jaguar that goes up there and breaks it, that happens quite often, as well as if they're startled by something. It could be nothing to be startled about. It could be a butterfly flying in front of their face, and that movement's going to startle them. They're going to scurry away from it, and in their scurrying, they could grab a hold of what they think is the next branch, and it's actually their own arm because their eyesight is so poor. They pick up a lot better on motion, but just by looking at something, they really just see shapes and shadows. You know, it's kind of like night goggle vision. If you've ever watched an action movie that shows some of that, that's pretty much what they see.
My mouth is open. You say?
Eyes are closing.
What was it?
I heard that. What?
Pretty buddy.
Oh, I saw those teeth. Must be for shredding the leaves as well.
Yeah.
I can see why that rice is annoying on the end of his nose or sweet potato.
Yeah. It is. It's definitely taught me patience. Yes, he absolutely hates having his mouth clean. And it reminds me all the time of when me and my brother were in preschool. My mom would drive us to school and drop us off in the mornings. We'd always eat Pop-Tarts in the back seat. When we'd get out, we'd have Pop-Tart, juices all around the corners of our mouth, and my mom would lick her thumb to get all of it off. And that's what, and we'd be squirming, and he does the same thing.
The wet napkin.
Yeah.
Well, you've made a friend, Josie.
Yes. Hi, buddy. I took you home, but I think they'd notice. Yeah. I didn't really look do they have much for a tail? Is it just a
They
little?
don't, the two-toed sloths, they don't have any vertebrae in their tail. Dash has like a little bit of a little nubbin sticking out, but he doesn't have any vertebrae in it at all. The three-toed sloths actually do have a tail, and they have like 4 extra vertebrae in their cervical spine as well. So they've got a little bit more up here and a little bit more down there. And the three-toed sloths are able to rotate their necks all the way 180 degrees backwards to look back behind them. The two-toed sloths can't do that. They don't have it there or as a tail. They actually have it in the middle. They have it in their lumbar spine. And that gives them the ability to have their hips facing one way and twist their spine all the way back 180 degrees backwards to look back behind them. And Zoe does that quite a bit. She'll have her back legs wrapped around somebody, and for him, if he's looking for his food, he'll just bend his head backwards to look at me. But Zoe will let go with her front hands and twist all the way back to look at me like that.
Now, who's Zoe?
Zoe is our other sloth. Zoe is our other holding sloth. So we've got Zoe, Flash, and Dash. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Zoe will be 2 years old in December. I think sometimes he forgets how long his tongue actually is because he leaves it sticking halfway out like that. And when he's sleeping, it sticks out even further, like halfway hanging out of his mouth. And it dries out and everything from where he was hanging out. And then when he wakes up and goes to pull it back in, he's like, it's so dry. And they're hearing, sudden noises, like if a door were to open and close really quickly, or if I were to accidentally clang a dish or something, those noises are really startling to them. A constant loud noise, like a voice talking over and over, isn't as bad, but sudden noises really can be really startling to them. You can kind of feel them tense up. And they, that's because of the eyesight, how poor their eyesight is. They make up for it there with their sense of hearing. He's really reactive to anything like that, and that's why most of the time when I do his encounters, I either sit on the counter or I have to stand really still and hold my hands together because I like to talk with my hands a lot, and that's really distracting for him. Because if he sees any type of little movement like that, he's more focused on the movement that's going on behind him rather than snuggling onto the person that he's holding on to. Flash has still not made his trek down yet.
Hey, Flash. Come on, baby.
And his hair has gotten a lot longer too. When we first got him, that shorter hair that's up on the top of his head is kind of the length that his hair was all over. And as they get older, their hair will grow out. But they don't really have any natural shed either. Like you've been petting him this whole time, you don't have any hair in your lap or anything. Some people consider them to be kind of hypoallergenic animals because since they don't have any shed, they don't really have any dander with that either. So a lot of times people that'll come in, they'll be kind of allergic to cats or something. They're like, oh darn, I should have took Benadryl this morning. I didn't even think of it. I'm like, well, we'll have to see how you're feeling afterwards because usually most of the time they do pretty good. They don't really have the same type of effect as a dog or a cat would, but they've got a lot of shed that will come out, depending on the breed that it is. But he heard that fridge open up, so he knows what that means.
Is it snack time?
Look at that butt.
Kind of roll right back.
Yeah.
And they have excellent core strength. I know, buddy, that mean fly's trying to get you. And then those flies, like they start, once they do it the one time, then they keep doing it over and over and over again.
You can feel it jump.
Yeah. But their core strength is absolutely amazing. He could let go completely with his front arms and reach all the way back, fully extended backwards, and still be able to pull himself up a lot quicker than we could. If he were to be leaning back like that and you touch his belly or touch his neck or something, that could startle him. Yeah, he can really sit up a lot quicker than I could do a sit up. It's really impressive, and it's really beneficial for them too, because if they're holding on to a branch and they see a branch down below them that they want to eat some of those leaves, instead of having to make the long trek all the way back to the trunk of the tree, go down and bend it back out, they can just let go with their front claws and reach down just by holding on to their back claws, grab that branch and pull it up to them and be able to eat that when they're completely inverted. and then they can pull themselves back up to grab a hold of that branch that they're holding onto again. So it works out just perfect for them. It's really an energy conserver as well. And for sloths that already have extremely low energy reserves, really is the best design for them.
Now, why do they have such low?
Well, in the wild, if you think about what their natural diet is, it's 95% leaf material. And leaves are not very high in calories, and it takes calories in order to create energy. So since they don't really have a whole lot of means to be able to do so, they just don't have a whole lot of energy to begin with. And that's why for a long time, scientists thought that they slept a lot more than they actually do. Because a lot of times when they're in the middle of the day, their eyesight is even worse. So they'll just be holding on to a branch of a tree, not doing absolutely anything, and they'll just be hanging there, just resting, but they're still awake. But a really comfortable resting position for a sloth is holding onto that branch up really close to it with their head in between their front legs. And you would think in that position that the animal would be sleeping, but in reality they're awake, they're aware of what's going on, they're just not looking around. And that's
You can
because...
feel every crack.
Yeah. That fly getting you again, buddy.
You got the sweet potato off of the
Oh,
field.
there we go, it works out.
Now, do these guys have more energy where they have a better diet?
A little bit, yeah. Because they're not exposed to things like brown rice and sweet potato and dog food out in the wild. So yeah, they do get more higher calorie diet in captivity, so they are a lot more active. And in general, you know, even in the wild, sloths are not as slow as like Zootopia portrays them to be.
Yeah.
That scene of Zootopia where the sloth is in the bank and they're like painfully slow to watch move. They're not that slow. You know, they definitely can be if they have no threat around them. But if they're startled by something, they can skedaddle pretty quickly. And for Flash, to make it in the mornings after he's done with his encounters, when we open up that door again, he's going back up. He can get from all the way down here to the top of his 20-foot enclosures in roughly about 10-15 seconds. So it doesn't take him very long. If he's on a mission and he knows where he's wanting to go, or same thing, sometimes if we have that door open and the stick set up for him to go into his outdoor enclosure, he'll just hook on and go directly out there. And if he's seeing that that door's open, he wants to go out there, he skedaddles pretty quickly. So I don't know why this door was left open, but...
You've got to read them before it's open, but it's just so cute, you've got to.
What is that?
A chupacabra. It's a camel.
Oh, that was a
Yeah.
camel. You see videos of people picking them up, like, you know, in their natural habitat.
Yes.
They're in the road and
Mhm.
stuff, and they move them
Yeah.
out to a tree.
Yeah. And believe it or not, that interaction where people are thinking that they're helping that animal by moving them and making sure they don't get hit by a car or anything can actually be more harmful to that animal than leaving them alone and letting them slowly cross that road by themselves, because that entire ecosystem that they have on their backs full of that moss and algae and fungus and those moths that are living in the fur of the sloth is really important for the animal, and it's an extremely sensitive system as well. So if you pick that sloth up or you wrap your hands around it and mess up, disturb that ecosystem, it's enough to completely wipe out that moth population. And for a wild sloth, if they don't have those moths on their backs, they can't digest their food, and that sloth could pass with a full belly of food, but pass from starvation because they can't digest any of it. So obviously the people don't know that before they go out, because they just think they're doing a good deed. And for, there's a lot of misconceptions out there about sloths too. I saw a video before I knew anything about a sloth, that there was somebody trying to help the sloth cross the road. They were in the middle of the road, so they went and got a stick, I think, to pick him up and try to move him over. And that sloth had a lot of little moths crawling all over him and bugs and everything. And I was like, that animal is sick. Like, there's something obviously going on to where those bugs should not be living on the back. They need to clean it off or get it to a rescue or something without having any knowledge of the animal. But if I went out there and cleaned that animal off and got rid of all those moths, that would be the end of the sloth, because like I said, if they don't have those moths on their backs, they can't exist. They wouldn't have the means to be able to digest their food. And so, people a lot of times just misinformed about the animals, and that's why we do a lot of the live streams and everything that we do,
Yeah.
so that even if people aren't able to come and interact with the animals, they still get a little bit of information about them, just to be able to kind of conserve the population and everything, because they're not endangered yet. Their habitat definitely is. But if lack of information is out there about the animals, then it can definitely go bad pretty quickly for them. So those moths, they do have a symbiotic relationship with them, and so that means that they both benefit. Not only the sloths, but the moths do as well. And so once a week when the sloth goes down to use the bathroom, they have to go down to the floor to use the bathroom, because if they didn't, if they stayed up in the tops of the trees, those moths would have nowhere to repopulate. So those moths will crawl down off of the sloth when they go down to the base of the tree, lay their eggs in the waste product of the sloth, and then a week later, when the sloth goes back to the same pile, those eggs have now developed into larvae, and last week's larvae are now this week's moths, and so those moths will crawl back up onto the sloth, and the cycle is always repeated. So it works out really well for them, and it also benefits the moths as well, because they will feed off of the moss and algae that's growing on the back of the sloth, that will be their food source. And not only do the moths provide them the moths provide the sloths with the bacteria that they're using to digest their food, but it's also a protein source for them. So they'll lick up a portion of those moths as well to be able to meet their protein requirements. And they don't have very high protein requirements, but what they do meet are pretty much met through those moths and a small variety of other bugs and insects that are on the leaves that they're eating, as well as on their own backs. A lot of people are surprised to know that if a sloth were to happen across a really small bird's nest with some really young baby birds in it, they would take that advantage as well and go ahead and eat those, and that would meet their protein requirements. As well as, like a lizard or something, if there's a little lizard crawling across a branch, they would definitely go after something like that.
Can you see his nose? It's just always going.
And that nose, the smoothness of it, how it kind of looks like leather there, that's kind of how their paw pads are as well. Their paw pads have leather there on them. When they're gripping around a branch, you kind of let them know what they're grabbing a hold of. If they can't really see it, they just grip onto it and take the time to think about that. And they can kind of decide if that's a branch or something that's not going to be as stable. Or if they were to grab onto their own arm or something like that too. That does happen sometimes. You can kind of see as he's moving his head like that on the side, the way that his hair will part kind of sticks out just a little bit. That's actually where his ears are at. They're a little bit further down the neck than you would think that they would be. But they do have fully formed little ears there on the sides of their heads that look pretty much like ours. They don't have as much folds and everything as ours do, but they do have little ears that stick out. It's not just a hole in the sides of their head like a chicken would have.
Mm-hmm.
What are you looking at, buddy?
The website says Zoe is the one that likes earrings and stuff like that.
Yes,
Yeah.
Zoe, yes, she will go after anything shiny like that. So we've got to have, because Dash, he likes to sit down real low in your lap, and he likes to be able to look up at you and look back behind him and see what's going on. But Zoe wants to be up high on your chest and have her arms wrapped around your shoulders. And I've got little scars around my shoulders right there from where she digs in, because this is their relaxed state, so that she doesn't have to think about doing that. And I have to remind her sometimes to loosen up by just tapping her foot, and you can feel it kind of loosen up on you. But with her being so much up high like that, she'll go for little earrings, especially hoop earrings, if she can stick a claw in it or something. Sometimes that happens.
Once you take him out with 10-30 people, I'm gonna walk in these rooms with them, with the other two sloths.
Cool. So you don't have to do anything, you just gonna climb onto my arm here. So they're under the pavilion?
Yeah.
Two familiar faces.
Uh-oh.
Famous, you're online.
How you guys doing?
Good,
How are
good.
you?
So-
This is Dash. Dash just turned a year old like 2 weeks ago, so he is still very much so a baby. And whenever we interact with a sloth, we always have to keep in mind that their eyesight is extremely poor. And so that kind of has to be at the forefront of our minds when we're interacting with them and everything. They have a condition that's called rod monochromacy, not be able to determine if it's a threat or if it's even food or what it is. So a lot of times they test that by opening up their mouths to see if they can eat it. So we try not to move around too much up around the face. We'll just do real slow pets like this down the middle of the back. They're not like a dog or a cat where those might like the scritches. They're really just like an open hand, and they don't like their hair to be moved up the opposite way. And for him, sometimes it's really tempting to scratch him on his chin because he'll have his neck turned backwards, looking back behind him. But that can be kind of startling for him because for a sloth, all of a sudden something's going for the neck that they can't see coming can be kind of scary. And their security blanket is really the fact that they can hold on around your waist. And so taking their leg and kind of pulling it away from you or touching that leg can be kind of insecure for him too. So we try to just avoid that. We'll just go down the middle of the back. So he's going to open up his legs and wrap around your waist. You'll take one hand and put it underneath his booty, and then the other hand you can use on his back.
You probably never get tired of doing
It's pretty great. It's a pretty great job. Especially on the slower days like today. We just have 2 encounters this morning and 2 this afternoon. And so in the middle of the day, they still, there's certain times throughout the day where they know they're supposed to have encounters. And Dash and Zoe genuinely enjoy the interactions and actively seek it out. They're very routine animals too, so they like to do the same thing at the same time every day. So we still pretty much hold them for the same, the hours that they would have had an encounter. We still try to hold them for that amount of time that they stick to their schedules. So Zoe
That makes
gets
sense.
extra snuggles and everything today by myself. In the middle of their
Is there any restrictions as to about pictures, no noises or?
I just don't try to use flashes,
That's,
yeah.
you can hide.
Yeah, for them in the daytime, and under the pavilion like this where it's shaded, it's not as bad. But out in the day, even if it's kind of overcast, they have what's called bright blindness, and their eyesight really works best at night. It's kind of like night goggle vision if you've ever seen a movie that shows them that. They probably don't have that green hue to them, but as far as seeing just the figures that move, that's basically what they see. So they can't really tell what it is that's moving around in front of them. They just see something. And for a sloth, it doesn't really have a whole lot of other defense mechanisms besides the fact that they, their eyesight works well for seeing motion. They've got to be able to pick that up and be able to react to it. Because if they're chilling, just hanging out on that branch, and all of a sudden in the corner of their eye, they see a little bit of movement, they have got to react to that and look for it because it could be a jaguar that's slowly creeping on that branch. Because the jaguar is not going to be barreling out towards them. They're going to be creeping because they're already going to be on a pretty thin branch. They're going to be going real slow. To get a hold, incognito. But the sloth has to be able to, if there was to be a little mouse or something run across the floor in my peripheral vision, my head and my brain is just going to deem that as insignificant. It's not a threat to me. I'm not going to worry about it. It would be different if something was barreling towards me. I'd say, okay, I'll look at that. But for a sloth, any little movement is important for them to look at. For them, if they're holding on to that branch and there's a jaguar that is sneaking out towards them, their defense is to just get to the very end of that branch. If they get to the end of the branch may be able to support a 10 or 15 pound sloth, but probably not a 35 or 40 pound cat as well. So if the cat is daring enough to get out there towards them as well, and the branch breaks, that's best case scenario for the sloth because those sarcopia trees can go up 100+ feet up in the air, and they're built to be able to withstand that fall. Whereas the cat is not. The cat's going to be trying to land on all 4 feet. From 5-10 feet in the air, that's fine.
Yeah.
But 100 feet in the air is a different story. But a sloth, you believe it or not, by looking at them, you wouldn't think so. But on the inside, they're kind of built like trucks. They've got a total of 46 ribs. That's 2 sets of 23. And that bottom 23 sets goes down all the way like right up against their hip bones. Whereas my rib cage stops about right here, and all that's exposed. Everything is protected for them. So when they hit the floor, everything on the inside is still secure, and they've got a lot of connective tissue that's holding all of their internal organs where they're supposed to be. And all of their ribs will just kind of flex under their body weight and go back to normal. Ours might break, but theirs is extremely flexible, so it works well for them. So they'll just go right back up the tree where they came from, where that cat's probably going to be laying there for quite a while.
one nectar.
Yeah. They get very talkative when they get to come outside.
Yeah.
I believe that's Tiki and Skittles down there drinking at each other right now.
We have a Mulligan
Oh, yeah?
and an African Greyhound.
Yeah?
The Mulligans will get that loud.
Yeah, both of those are macaws, and then we've got two umbrella cockatoos, and a green Amazon things like that. I don't know, birds.
Yeah.
So
They'll do the sloths.
we knew them right away when we were walking here. We could hear, we were like, oh, we know that.
Yeah. He always looks astonished when he's got his mouth gaped open.
Yeah.
But this type of behavior for a sloth where he's genuinely enjoying it, hold on to you, and actively, seeking out the interaction is very unusual for a sloth. That's not typical. Typically, people think about sloths being really slow, gentle, docile animals, and in the wild they are as long as they're left alone. But if you were to try to have an encounter like this with a wild sloth or a sloth that had never been held before, it would be essentially the difference between holding a house cat and a feral cat. So they would eat you up trying to get away from you.
I was just thinking that
Yeah.
too. I wondered, are they naturally like this, that
They're naturally very solitary animals. They're not naturally vicious animals, but they just want to be left alone. They want to be by themselves. You're not even going to see two sloths hanging out right next to each other,
Really?
unless it's a mom and a baby. And they just, they'll be right on each other until they're not, until they separate.
Video camera out. He's got some tongue.
But so Dash was born and raised in captivity, and just because of that doesn't mean that he's naturally going to be wanting to hold on to people. He had a lot of conditioning and training and everything from a really young age in the breeding program that he was born into to get him to this point. So he was born into an ambassador program where the mothers were almost kind of clicker trained to know that when the breeder came in there and made that little clicker noise, that she was going to borrow the baby. She was in the treat, and then the baby would go right back to mom afterwards. So mom's never stressed out, but she knows very routine animals and like to stick to the same thing at the same times every single day. So mom knew what was going on. It was just normal, it was natural time for her for that to happen. And the baby just picked that up pretty quickly because mom's not stressed, so she's not stressed. So it's always a positive interaction that they're having with people. And it works up slowly to where the first several interactions are just holding for 10, 15 seconds, and then slowly working up to a minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, and holding for longer periods of time as the baby is comfortable with it, until that baby is weaned around 5 months old from the mother's own choosing. It's never influenced by the breeder, but the mother will eventually just be like, you've learned enough to make it on your own, and she'll leave it. And then that baby's used to being held for upwards to an hour a day at a time, and is completely fine with that. They kind of almost go from their mom being their source of comfort to then humans being there for them. So it's a really nice, easy transition. What is this screeching?
Their nose is so smooth.
And sometimes you can almost see, it looks like little beads of sweat on it, like they've got little, they don't have any natural sweat glands on them, but on their nose, they've got real high humidity requirements, and so we have to mist their enclosures once a day. So a lot of times their nose will still be wet from that.
just a love and life right now.
You would rather be holding onto a person than holding onto a tree. His two favorite places to be is either on a person or in a basket, believe it or not, and that's not natural for a sloth either. But that was kind of what they were conditioned onto. And during the day, they already don't move around a whole lot. And so in their enclosures, he has a little basket that goes into his entire enclosure. And he'd rather stay in that basket with an owl covered up over top of him, which is specific to him. We have Zoe, we got Zoe around the same age. And she never did that. She liked to stay in the basket, but she didn't want to cover herself up like he does. That was very specific to him.
That's interesting.
And she also did not nurse on the corners of blankets like he does, which is very odd to me because sloths only nurse from their mothers from around 2 to 5 weeks, and that's it. It varies depending on the species and depending on the gender of the sloth.
What did they do after that?
they just stay with the mom to be able to kind of figure out how to be a sloth, how to evade, you know, jaguars and what to eat, what not to eat, where to eat, how to rest, different things like that. You know, because when they're born, they're only about on your hand, so they're really small, and they've got a lot of time to, you know, figure out what's going on. He just turned a year old, about 2 weeks ago. The two-tone sloths can get to be up to 20 pounds at the back, but Flash and Zoe are both pretty much full. Flash is full grown. Zoe's pretty much plateaued off, even though she's not quite 2 years old yet, and they're both about 15 pounds. Now that's on average. Sloths only go to the bathroom once a week, so right before they go to the bathroom, they're up to like, you know, 16, 17, 18 pounds almost. And then when they go to the bathroom, they drop down about 1/3 of their entire body weight.
I read that.
Yeah. So it is a massive amount, and it's not just solids. It's not just one big pile. It's a big puddle as well.
Sure.
So it's liquids as well that comes out just once a week, and pee up at the tops of the trees. And it's important for them that when they go to the bathroom, they come down to the floor to do so. And that's not just in the wild, that's in captivity as well. In captivity, they don't necessarily need to do that because they don't have moths living on their backs like they do in the wild. But in the wild, will have all these different types of little moths that are living all throughout their fur and all throughout that entire ecosystem that is living on their back full of moss and algae and fungus. And those moths are really important for the sloth because they produce a very specific type of bacteria in their waste that the sloths will use to be able to digest their food. They'll lick that up and they'll go into their system, and that's how they digest it. Yeah, they don't use an enzymatic process like we do, and we're born with those enzymes. They use a bacterial process, and they're not born with that bacteria already in their gut. They've got to get it from somewhere. And so when they're babies, they'll get a certain amount from their mothers. They'll lick the mother around the corners of her mouth and get a little bit of hers. But then in the wild, the moths that are on the mom's back will then crawl over on the baby, and it'll kickstart that bacterial process a lot quicker. And in captivity, you can see he doesn't have any moths or anything on his back. He just got it from his mother when he was around 3 days old. And it takes a little bit longer to establish, and that's why it's really sensitive to own a baby sloth, like, you know, before it's 5 months old, because that's when the most important, crucial time of its life is to be able to get that good gut bacteria in their system. Because if they don't establish it really well, they're going to have issues the rest of their life. Trust a breeder that knows what they're doing. And a common question, we have plans to breed here. We definitely don't have any just yet. We definitely have to be a lot more, you know, in tune and have a lot more knowledge to be able to do something like that, because it is really crucial for that baby to have a good start.
Get them together.
Yeah, exactly.
It squeezes.
But in the wild, with having all those moths and everything living on their backs, they need somewhere to repopulate. And for the moths, that's actually the waste product of the sloth. And they can't fly like other moths can. They can only have they need direct contact to be able to crawl onto whatever it is they're getting onto. And so that's why they have to go down all the way to the floor to the same spot every single time to go to the bathroom. Because those moths will come down, lay their eggs, and then a week later, those eggs will have developed into larvae, and last week's larvae are now this week's moths. And so those moths will crawl back up, and the cycle is just always repeating. Yeah. And that's probably my favorite part about sloths as a whole, is just that whole symbiotic relationship. Because if it was messed up even just a little bit by somebody that wasn't even meaning to, like I was just telling another lady in there that before I knew anything about sloths, I saw a video of a sloth that was crossing a road, and so somebody went and got a stick to pick it up and move it over to the other side so that they could get it out of the road. And that sloth had all those moths and bugs and everything crawling all over it, and moss and algae and growing on it too. And I was like, that sloth is obviously in dire need of some attention. Like, it needs to be bathed, it probably needs some medicines, like go to a rehab or something, because it looks like it's like on the way out. And that was without having any knowledge about sloths. And so if I were to do that and take that sloth and bathe it and get rid of all that moss and algae, get rid of all the moths and everything, that would be the end of the sloth. They would pass from starvation, even with a full belly of food, just not able to digest, not able to process any of it. And that's really why we're so passionate about education. And that's why we do a lot of the live streams and everything too, because beforehand I didn't know anything about sloths, and if I went to Costa Rica or something and could partake in something like that, I would have. And so we try to get that information out there just so people are aware and are able to make informed decisions before they do anything like that.
Makes sense.
Yeah. And And the whole idea behind having sloths that you can actually hold and interact with is where they're naturally native to. A lot of times the natives in the area will go out, get those sloths out of the tree, and present them to the public to be like, if you give me $20, you can hold it for 5 minutes and take some pictures.
Oh, wow.
And people, you know, if they're getting off of a cruise ship there in Roatan, Honduras, it's a really big thing there. Now the Conservancy Agency has been doing a really good job recently of shutting down a lot of those organizations that have been doing that and enforcing more rules and regulations against interacting with wild sloths. But beforehand, it was just rampant that, you know, the natives would go out, they would know the cruise ship is coming tomorrow, the cruise ship's coming tomorrow, so they go out the day before, find a sloth, even if it's a baby sloth, off of the mother's back, and bring it to where they can set it in a roadside petting zoo. And, you know, they've got all that moss and algae and everything growing on them, and that's not going to look the best in pictures, so a lot of times what they do is they'll dunk them in a bucket of cleaner, scrub off all that moss and algae, and get rid of all those moths, so that it's more presentable. And if they get a sloth that's a little bit bitey and trying to get away by using their teeth, they will pull the sloth's teeth. And after an event like that, it's roughly 2.5 weeks that sloth will have left to live. Yeah. He gets a lot more sleepy when I bring him out here, and he can feel the breeze.
Oh, yeah.
And
Yeah, happens to me too.
sometimes it's almost quieter out here too, if the birds aren't chirping and everything, or squawking, screaming, I should say. Because inside there's a lot of people coming in and out of the sloth room trying to get food out of the fridge and stuff. And he's very, very easily distracted by movement that's back behind him. So that's why a lot of times when I do his encounters, I have to hold my hands together because I talk with my hands a lot.
Oh,
And if he's got his eyes open and sees me moving, he can't focus on the person that's holding him. He's just pushing away, looking at my hands to see what's going on. He is definitely our most ADHD sloth. Zoe couldn't care less. I mean, when she's got her belly full and she's not thinking about anything else other than snuggles, she wants to be up high on your chest so that she can wrap around your shoulders and have her neck right beside her head right beside your neck, where she's not looking at anything else but your hair, basically.
You want that job, don't you?
Yeah. Say that until you get little scars on your shoulders. I just got engaged, and so I went about 3 weeks ago now, but I went yesterday to try on my dress after alterations and everything, and it has an open back, and so I was looking at it and I'm like, oh my goodness, I got little scars up here. I'm gonna have to like wear a towel around my shoulders or something like the week before our wedding. Today, or is it just the sloths?
Just the sloths.
Where you guys in from?
Aqua River.
North Carolina.
Yep.
So 2 hours away, so probably be someplace.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
It actually helps. How late do you allow for a visit for an encounter like this?
For an encounter with the sloths, they're on a strict schedule. So the very last encounter that we have for the day would be at 4:30. That's his very last encounter.
That's excessively late.
Yeah, and so he's got a long break throughout the day. You know, he can have an hour of encounter in the morning and an hour of encounter in the afternoon from 4 to 5, and that's it. We would never book him for more than that. He would gladly hold on to somebody for longer than that, but if it was just natural that he just got held all the time, anytime he wanted to, he would never have anything to look forward to.
Yeah.
But right before, you know, he knows every day at 4 o'clock, somebody's coming in here to hold me. And usually, you know, certain things like a farm tour will be going through right at that time. And so if he hears a lot of people out there talking, he will wake up, he'll uncover himself, be reaching out, trying to get somebody to come and pick him up. So they do look forward to it. And that's what we like to keep it at. We don't ever want it to be something that they dread or that they see somebody coming for them. They're like, oh, there's more people.
Yeah.
And if we book them back to back to back to back all day, every day, without having, you know, breaks in between, that would what it would get to eventually. Because they do sleep a lot throughout the day. They've got to have time to be able to do that.
Well, they get tired of it too.
Yeah.
Well, probably
I mean,
not you.
yeah, Dash would do it for probably several days in a row, but then after like a week of holding him all the time and booking him, because not everybody holds and interacts with him like you do, are really slow and calm. A lot of people have a lot more energy and are really excited to see a sloth for the first time. So having a couple of those encounters wears him out pretty quickly because while he enjoys this, having somebody that's hitting a lot quicker and rubbing up the wrong way and ignoring things that I've told them can be usually beforehand that little spiel about where to touch him, where not to touch him, and things like that gets a little bit longer. If I have people that are a little bit more excited and everything, just to get them to calm down, bring their energy
Oh,
level
she was very
down.
emotional last night.
Oh, really? Oh, cool.
So what's his diet basically? What do they eat?
So in the wild, they would be eating 95% leaf material. The other 5% would be a small variety of bugs and insects that they get their protein from.
Oh.
And if they were to come across a small bird's nest with some really young baby birds in it, they would eat something like that too, or like lizards or something. But the leaves that they're eating in the wild are the leaves of the sarcopia trees, and those only grow in Central and South America, not up here. And so we don't have any leaves that completely replicate the type of nutrients that are in those. So we have to substitute with a lot of other things. So they still get about 75% leaf material, things like baby spinach and kale and romaine lettuce and things like that. But they also get other veggies like squash, zucchini, sweet potatoes. They also get really high fiber biscuit. That helps with the plaque buildup on their teeth too, a little bit harder. And then they need protein sources too. So some bigger organizations or breeders will actually opt to give them pinkies, the little mice that have, no hair on them yet, and they'll eat those. If it was a nutrition requirement, we would do it, but you can substitute with a lot of other forms of protein. So once they're over 2 years old, we transition them over on 2 hard-boiled eggs a week, and that's their protein source. And that's all they need for protein. Your one boiled egg has 16 grams in it, and 2 boiled eggs a week is all they need. So they have really low protein requirements, but do it like that, or a mixture that he's on right now, and we keep him on this mixture pretty heavily until they're about 2 years old, is a mixture of brown rice, shaved up sweet potatoes so they don't choke when they're babies, and a really high quality dog food that's been soaked in water and mixed into it, and that's where they get their protein from. Because when they're babies, they need a lot more steady of a diet, and getting a big protein source on 2 days a week are kind of a bigger, harder thing for them to digest. Do it a little bit of protein every day and work up to
You
that.
guys really have thought this out.
Yeah.
Is this an earring?
It is, yeah.
Okay.
And it's a fully formed little ear too. It's not just a little hole in the size of the head. You can feel that little bit of ear sticking out. They're kind of shaped like ours. They don't have all the little folds and everything like ours do, but yeah. And there's a lot of conflicting information out there about sloths. Some people have been doing it one way for a long time, and that's the way that they swear by. They say if you feed them this kind of diet, they'll live the longest. If you feed them anything else, they're not going to live very long. And then other people will be on the completely other side of the spectrum and say if you feed them like that, they're not going to live longer than 6 years. You need to feed them like this and meet all these requirements. So there's a lot of conflicting information out there about sloths, and the people that have been doing it for a long time are set in their ways because they know that's what works best for them, and so that's what the information that they give out. So with owning sloths, you really have to have one definite person and following their ways, because there can be a lot of information out there that's just back and forth. The oldest sloth that we know of that was born and raised in captivity was actually in a zoo in Germany, and he passed away last August at the age of 54.
Oh.
So he lived to be really long, and his roommate actually lived to be 50. So they can live really long, healthy lives as long as they're getting all their nutrition requirements met. And so a lot of people try to kind of mimic what they are doing there, because obviously they're doing something right. Now, it's not typical that they live that long. Typically, they live around 30 years in captivity, which is still a pretty long time. In the wild, there's yet to be any scientists that have been able to track one singular sloth from birth until natural passing. A lot of times, their lives are taken prematurely by jaguars or ocelots or harpy eagles and things like that. That's that green Amazon. That's Rio. And some people would consider that to be natural passing, but we have to be able to calculate it without anything like that happening for them. So that has yet to happen with the sloth. There's a lot of ongoing research about them. Not as many sloth scientists as there are about any other type of animal. So.
Is he imitating somebody?
Yes, that's Donna. He's saying, "I love you."
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of the things that he says has are in Donna's tone of voice, really high pitched.
Oh, yeah.
And yeah, because she's taught him to say a lot of things. But before we got him from some guy, and I don't know what he was teaching her,
Oh, no.
but
Oh, no.
sometimes she says naughty words,
Yeah.
and guests will hear him and be like, "Is she?" And we're like, "No, I don't know where she would have heard that from." But she's also got this really weird like robot voice that she does,
Oh,
and it
yeah.
freaks me out, especially at night if you're staying here late and you come down here and you all of a sudden hear like this robotic possessed noise behind you. But
Yeah, the worst my African gray does is he'll call you done out.
But he does do that, he goes red brown.
Oh, the red
see, I don't do the birds. The birds, I've never been a big fan of them. They just move very, and same thing with sloths. You know, sloths are a very different type of animal than anybody has ever really been around.
Yeah.
So a lot of people are pretty timid when they first come in, especially younger ones. The age limit for dash is 8. So sometimes we can get 8-year-olds that come in that like really want to interact with them, but at the same time